Hello everyone, it's Katie. I'm the Interim Director Curator at the Clark Historical Museum, and I'm going to be running today's Ask a Curator. So I can see you guys' comments as you're commenting on the video, so feel free to ask away, and I will answer your questions. So I guess really quick, I've been at the museum for, it'll be 3 years in September. I was originally the registrar, so I did a lot of the behind the scenes kind of paperwork and keeping track of items and doing exhibits. Registrar is kind of a title at our museum that has a lot of hats, so started out doing that, and then in January our previous director got a new job, so I was temporarily promoted to Interim Director, and been doing that since January, and it's been a wild ride. That's for sure. So anyway, let's see, so during closures and things like that, what have we been up to? So of course our social media director's been doing a lot of work to get our kind of image and everything out there. And our registrar's been digitizing a lot of photos, so when we come out of this, we'll have a whole bunch of new photos digitized that we can use for postcards, we can use for advertising, we can allow our, have available for researchers, things like that. So we're keeping busy. And I guess one thing that a lot of people don't know when it comes to museum work is that even though there might not be a lot going on in the museum floor, there's a lot going on in the background. So that's something kind of worth remembering. Let me just get this so I can... My computer decided to not cooperate today when it came to me doing videos, so now I gotta use my phone and have my computer set up, and it's just kind of being a little weird. But anyway, you might have seen a cat a little bit ago. That is my roommate. Her name is Kitty. She's a 21-year-old gray cat, and so she might come in and out of the video, particularly because I was eating some pretzels earlier, and she loves pretzels and crunchy food, so she always gets excited. Anyway, for those of you that are just joining us, feel free to ask questions in the comments, things like that. So as I kind of mentioned, even while we're closed, there's a lot of kind of behind the scenes stuff that we're doing. And for me, that includes a lot of reading. So this is a book I picked up from the internet. I found it because the guy who wrote it, Philip Deloria, was recently, now probably about 2.5 or 3 weeks ago, was on, he was being interviewed by Native American Family Services, which is also known as Two Feathers Native American Family Services is the full name. They've been doing these really great videos interviewing different Indigenous leaders and things like that. And I watched his interview. He was talking about it was this one Indigenous artist lady, and it was really interesting. It was a lady that people hadn't really heard about, but he had written a whole book on her, and it was really cool. So they mentioned this book, and it's called Playing Indian. So it's talking about how throughout a pretty good substantial part of U.S. history, there's been kind of this, I want to say underlying, but that's not really what I mean. But there's kind of this running narration of how like post-settlement communities view Native Americans and kind of reimagining Native Americans in this vision of this kind of colonial situation. So far it's a pretty good book. But I've also been doing some reading on Neelis Hall, so that includes our basket collections. Some reading on interpretation, which is kind of the art of sharing information with the public, things like that. So we have one comment. It's from Elizabeth Ashley Williams. She says, "My daughter can't wait till she can come by. She misses going there." Oh, that's good to hear. We look forward to seeing you and your daughter when we reopen. And we hope you guys are enjoying some of the digital stuff that we're sharing during the closure. It's not the same, but it's nice still. So let's see. I've been doing some reading. I have been going by the museum, checking up on things like that. And taking photos, a lot of working on blogs. I like doing the blogs. Right now I'm working on one that's about running sports in Humboldt County. Recently it'll be posted, I think, Saturday morning or Sunday morning, but it's about balloonists of Humboldt County. Most balloonists weren't actually from the county, but traveled through on kind of this big circuit of ballooning. Jim at the Historical Society did the research and the writing for it, so that'll be posted on Saturday. And there are some awesome pictures. There's one that includes this one famous balloonist who traveled all along the coast. Her name was Hazel Keyes, and she not only would take a hot air balloon up into the sky and then parachute out, but she had a pet monkey that would parachute with her, which sounds pretty crazy, but it was a real thing. And we have pictures of her and a monkey. So keep an eye out for that. And I really like sharing those kind of wild and crazy local history stories. It's kind of interesting to see what people would do with their time. So Dana asks, in finding objects for Curator Battle, are you having fun with that? So Curator Battle is this thing on Twitter where there was a museum, I think it was in the UK, that said, we're going to challenge other curators to post stuff from their collections. And I don't know if it started before COVID or if this was like kind of a COVID innovation, but they really got off the ground a couple weeks ago when they challenged other museums to post their creepiest object. And you can imagine that got pretty crazy pretty quick. It got international attention and has kind of been a runner, has been a running kind of Twitter feed, I guess. And that's been pretty fun. One week it was show us your sassiest object, and that was kind of difficult initially because I was like, okay, well, how is an object sassy? But for the heck of it, I looked it up on our sass on our database, and it turned out that there was a rancher who lived in what was called the Eureka Township, who was his last name was Sass. So I was like, okay, we had a cattle brand of his that was given to the office that kind of keeps track of that thing, those kinds of things. And so we sent a picture of that in, and then there was also a pair of sheer purple underwear that someone had donated. And I remember the lady when she brought it in, because she had this kind of little paper bag, and she's like, I have a couple things. So I was cleaning up my mom's house, and I found this. And it's, some of the stuff's kind of cool, but if there's like one thing I want you to take, it's this thing. And I was like, okay. So she takes out this pair of purple underwear and lays it out on the table. And my boss, Ben, was also in the office and was kind of like, oh, what? And then he looks over and is like, what? And both of us are just like, purple underwear, what the heck's the deal with that? And on one side of it, there's little puffy painted words that say, my time is you time, and had a little clock and like some little stars and stuff. And I was like, okay. And I don't know how many people know this, but the Clark actually has a pretty substantial, not only textile collection, but lingerie collection. So, for the, oh, hi Kitty, for the, for posterity, had to save this bright purple underwear. So I also sent in a picture of that. and that was pretty fun. Oh, hi, Kitty. Kitty's like, I want the pets. So David asks, I have so many questions about how you get a monkey to skydive with you. I do too. That must have taken a lot of training. And also looks like Yorkshire Museum was the museum that started Curator Battle. So keep an eye out for that. This week's is most magical item. So I'm kind of looking for some things there. There was a guy named Glendon Smith, also frequently known as Signsmith, with the word sign in initial or quotations. And he was not only a sign maker in Old Town, his sign making shop Sign is still up on what's that, 2nd and I have a hard time with names, but it's this right across from the Vance. Yeah, right across from the Vance, I think. And he was also a magician when he wasn't making signs. So I might be finding some things from him. He donated like over 1,000 items to the museum. Him or his family, I can't really remember which. But so we have a lot of things to pick from. So I'm looking forward to that. God, goodness, Kitty. She keeps like high-fiving me, trying to get all the pets. Anyway. So for those of you who might be tuning in, feel free to ask questions in the little comments section and I'll answer them. Or, if you have comments or things like that. I'll be here till 3. So David asks, when will the Clark do a historical lingerie of Humboldt special exhibit, maybe for Valentine's Day next year? That was something that has been previously discussed about doing a specifically Victorian lingerie exhibit in the Victorian room, because Victorian lingerie is not anything, well, yeah, it's not very much like what we consider lingerie today. So, but I always thought that would be a pretty funny exhibit to do. But we'll see. We'll see what we end up doing. We're always looking for exhibit ideas, so if you have any ideas for exhibits, feel free to let us know. One of the questions I've been asking previous people who have done this Facebook Live thing is, what would be your dream exhibit to host at the museum? And, if you'd asked me that a couple years ago, I probably would have said something about the national parks, which it was funny, I started working at the Clark in 2017 and 2018, we got to do an exhibit on Redwood National and State Parks, which was perfect timing because I'd recently worked at the state parks in the southern part of the county, and it was a lot of fun to be able to team up with national parks people, national park archive people, other museum people. We even teamed up with one of the guys who did some of the most like influential photographs of the park. He's brought a lot, or he loaned us some of his photographic works to hang in the exhibit. So if you went to that exhibit, it's called The Redwoods Provided. Those really big color photographs, those were on loan from us, or to us, from, oh my goodness, I have a heck of a time with names, Kitty. But that was a really fun exhibit. We got stuff from Timber Heritage, and all kinds of things. So we have a message from Tree. I have a gorgeous piece of lingerie of my mom's from 1951. Do you want me to email you a photo of it? Sure. That would be great. You can email us. My email is Caitlin, Caitlyn, @clarkmuseum.org. Feel free to send me a picture of it. What a strange job sometimes. Please send me a picture of lingerie. But yeah, makes it fun. So yeah, feel free to send me a picture of it. I'll take a look and see if we have anything similar to it in our collection. And if we don't, we'll see about setting up a donation time for you. So besides the National Park exhibit being something that was a lot of fun, let's see. So A dream exhibit. It would be really great. And this would require like thousands, literally, of dollars of mannequins because of the exhibit, would be to display a bunch of our Victorian, particularly dresses and clothing that we have. We've displayed some of it over the years. Like you can probably look back at our website and see pictures of some of it being put out. But the thing with Victorian clothing, and part of the reason why we don't show it all that much right now, is that the dimensions of people at that time do not match the dimensions of the mannequins we have. Our mannequins are pretty modern, and there's been situations where I've tried to show dresses and we have to take our child's mannequin and put the dress on that, and the child's mannequin is still too big in the waist to fit the dress. So, hence the need for thousands of dollars in mannequins to be able to put a lot of those dresses on display in a really nice, crisp way. So that would probably be one of my dream exhibits. I'm really interested in Victorian clothing, partially because it's really interesting to see how all these different layers of fabric kind of compound onto each other to create this silhouette. You know, usually something kind of like that. That is very kind of representative of that time. Hi, kitty. And with Victorian clothing and Victorian styles, when you look at it over time, the changes in that silhouette are what kind of delineate what period it is and the whole timeline of Victorian clothing. So that would be really fun to do. I would really like to do that. And we do have a lot of Victorian clothing. So that would be something cool. If you happen to have access to custom-made mannequins, give us a call. Especially if they are relatively inexpensive. Besides that, I think it'd be really fun to do an exhibit. And we've probably done this before my time. But doing an exhibit on some of the children's toys we have. We used to have a particularly large doll collection, and it was kind of spooky. I've seen pictures of it. But we have a lot of really interesting children's toys. Some of them aren't super old, some of them are pretty old. One of them is like a wax doll that is unfortunately not in very good shape, but like when dolls were made of wax before they were made of plastic. So that thing dates way back. But we have a lot of really cool children's toys. We also have a lot of teacups. And I really like teacups. If you watched the initial video we did on this, I have a teacup collection in my house. And the Clark has some pretty spectacular teacups, I'm not gonna lie. That was probably the first thing that caught my eye when I first toured around our storage area, was that there were so many teacups. And we got mustache teacups and all kinds of fun things. Dana asks, is this the creepy wax doll with the melted face? That was the one I was talking about. The wax doll that is in unfortunately bad shape. Yep. It's the wax doll. Yeah. That was one of our forerunners also for creepiest object. Trying to remember what we ended up picking for that particular week, or if we did that. I don't think we did that week. But anyway. So let's see. What do we do behind the scenes? So as a curator, and this I would say typically goes for curators also in larger museums. Granted, I've never worked in one, but I've done some research into how other museums operate to get some good ideas. Curators do a lot of research. because you're not only trying to come up with information for an exhibit, but you're also working on coming up with additional information on the things that are in your collections. So we do a lot of research. So a lot of times when I'm working on research for things like the blog or things like exhibits, I incorporate that research into our databases so that in the future, if someone else is looking up something, they might have more information than when I tried to go look up something. Because when it comes to our databases and the information we have on our items, in some situations, it's pretty sparse. It might say, like, iron, and that's it, or photo of man. And it's kind of particularly frustrating if you're like, wow, look at this really cool picture of this person. I'm gonna go try to see who it is. Like, they got this uniform, or look at this thing in the background. And then you go look it up, and it says photo of man. And you're like, okay, what year, what place, who is this guy? So doing research is really important to improving our records, not only for the people using the databases now, but for the people who are going to use the databases in the future. So if you're really interested in researching, me giving you a picture and saying, tell me what this thing is, and you say, yes, I will. If you're interested in that kind of work, let me know. Because that kind of work can, be done in person when things are safe, or it can be done remotely. So we can send you pictures of an item and say, please do some research and help us identify what this is, or tell us what this was used for. That's something I have a lot of fun doing. Sometimes things get way out of my wheelhouse, though, and I'm just like, I don't even know what this thing is, or where it's from, or what it's made out of. Like, what? But that's one thing I like about being a curator and working in a museum sometimes, is walking in and seeing something and being like, all right, time to do some detective work, figure out what the heck this is. I have a lot of fun with that. And just kind of like following little stories around. That's kind of how this balloonist thing started. I found a picture, I'm trying to remember how exactly this started, but at one point in time I found a picture of a hot air balloon being inflated, and it looks pretty weird because it's just kind of these big wooden poles, and then there's like a line, and then there's like the top of a balloon like attached to the line, and then there's some people standing around at the bottom, and everyone's looking at the camera like, as they kind of do. I was like, oh, hot air balloons, okay, that's kind of weird. So I mentioned it to, I feel like it was Steve Lazar, maybe he brought it up, or maybe I mentioned it to him, I can't remember. But he had said, oh yeah, hot air balloons, yeah, they were a thing in Humboldt County. There was one that burst into flames during 4th of July. I was just like, what? He said, yeah, it was mentioned in a newspaper article, and I can't find a picture of it, but supposedly this photographer, Jesse Miser, took a photo of it, but we can't find it. So if you find it, let us know. And then I, kind of started talking to other people about it, said, okay, what's the deal with these hot air balloons? And then Jim found out about it, and Jim did a bunch of research on it. That's also probably one of my favorite things about kind of working in the history field. Definitely up here. I haven't worked in the history field anywhere else. But if you find something, 95% of the time, you can email it to someone and say, do you know more about this? And then they will either put you in touch with, a lot of times, Milt Fegley. Shout out to Milt Fegley. And Arlene Harton. Shout out to Arlene. They're kind of the dynamic duo of things about Humboldt County history. Or, the person that you happen to email happens to know what exactly you're looking for. So there's a really great, helpful community in terms of studying and researching local history up here. So if you're looking for something, like a new hobby to pick up maybe, and you're interested in local history, give us a call, give the Historical Society a call. We will help you out. It's a lot of fun. I have a really good time with it. So let's see. Curators do a lot of research. We do a lot of exhibit building. Exhibits, when it comes to putting them together, we usually set the next year's exhibit schedule the summer before the new year. So probably about August or so, we'll start talking about what exhibits we're going to do next year. We got the lingerie exhibit idea coming up over here. There's some talk of doing some kind of Humboldt County COVID exhibit kind of thing. That's bouncing around. Someone told us that there's going to be a big anniversary for the Eureka Inn coming up soon. So we kind of look at, are there anniversaries coming up? People love anniversaries. And it's really popular, and it's kind of a neat way to tie in present day with the past. We look for anniversaries, we look for important events. Our last exhibit of this year is going to be on notable women of Humboldt County, and that has a lot to do with the whole women's suffrage thing. So women officially gained the right to vote 100 years ago this year. Some people said it was last year. Last year was the 100th anniversary of when the vote went through and women were legally allowed to vote, but it didn't go into effect until the following year. So that's kind of our answer to women's suffrage, because we don't have a lot of items from that movement, unfortunately. But other places do. So what do you think about that? Sorry about that. And we also look at what kind of items we have on display. So if there's not really an anniversary coming up, or some other thing that we want to base an exhibit around, we might also kind of go into storage and say, okay, what stories do we want to tell? Like we did one a year ago in January. We did one on Humboldt County industries. So, because Humboldt County had a lot of industries, still does, but the whole kind of rapid fire changing of industries in the county could really be seen in about 1850 to 1915. It was like agriculture rising and falling, different brand or parts of agriculture, like different crops would rise and fall. There'd be different livestock rise and fall. There'd be shipbuilding. There'd be lumber work, all kinds of things like that. So that was a pretty interesting exhibit, and that was just kind of a survey, like, let's look at a bunch of different industries over this period, not particularly going into any specific companies or anything. I mean, we did mention some. There was like Ben Dixon, the ship company that was on the bay for a long time. But it was just kind of like, let's look at all of these industries. So sometimes we'll do things like that. I'm really interested in telling stories specifically, so trying to find, exhibits where you can there is a story existing in it, and you can kind of build off of that. So, yeah, we're still trying to figure out next year's schedule. But if you have any exhibit recommendations, or if there's something you'd like to see, feel free to let us know. You can let us know in the comments here. You can email us. You can send us a letter. I would say stop by, but we're still closed. Hence, I'm in my living room right now. But yeah, and another friendly reminder, now that we're about halfway through this, if you have any questions, feel free to ask them in the comments. Yeah, so let's see. So yeah, we do a lot of research. Of course, we do exhibits. What else do we do? I like to do a lot of events, kind of things. That was sort of something I took on as registrar a lot of times, because I'd say, okay, we're going to have an exhibit. Now, how do we get a bunch of people to go to that exhibit? And one of those ways was through events that tied in with the exhibit. So I'm a big fan of kind of spreading the work out when it comes to events like that. So it's really great to be able to team up with local community groups that have some sort of tie to the exhibit. Like we did in our Prohibition exhibit, we did a homebrewers night, Humboldt Homebrewers and Distillers night. So we had the Humboldt Homebrewers, we had 3 different distilleries come out. It was like Dutch and Dewey, Alchemy, and Dutch and Dewey, Alchemy. Oh god, what was the last one? Anyway, and of course the Humboldt Homebrewers, and that was one of our popular events. So All right, so we got some questions here. So we got Dana says, what have you personally found most challenging during the closure? That's a good question. I mean, I particularly miss the events that I was kind of talking about. It's really great to see people coming into the museum, learning new things, talking with others, interacting with the stories that we're telling, and like all that kind of stuff. I really miss that because it brings a lot of life into the museum. Like museums are cool when they're just there, but they really have a life when there are people there as well. Because it's not just, I am museum, I tell you story, you accept story, and you leave. Like I'm telling a story, you're hearing the story, you might have, some kind of conversation with that story, whether that's just by yourself or talking about it with someone else or, talking to whoever made the exhibit, things like that. There's a conversation that is there. And you don't really have that when there's no one in the museum. You can kind of have it, digitally, like we're doing now, sharing information. But it's not the same as having people in the exhibit. Plus, a lot of times, people I know happen to swing by and they say hi, and that's always nice. And I can walk around Old Town on my breaks and things like that. So I really miss that, and that's been kind of challenging. Also, being sure that I'm not sitting at my desk for literally 8 hours straight is kind of challenging as well. Because sometimes I just get in this, focus, and I look at the clock, and I'm like, oh, okay, I haven't moved in 8 hours, so this is not good. Anyway, so those are some challenges that I've had. Tree asks, are all the items you have from Humboldt County? I don't know if I'd say most, but probably most are from Humboldt County. There are some that people have donated in the past that are not from Humboldt County, but we're trying to really kind of narrow down our collecting in terms of we want the item to be locally relevant, whether that was owned by a local person, used by a local person, made by a local person, things like that, because we don't have a lot of storage. So we're trying to really hone that in. So we do have things in the collection not from Humboldt County, but we are focusing on collecting items from Humboldt County. So there's that. Plenty of the items have also traveled around. There was one, it's a Payroll Safe Box. So it's this big metal box. It's got these handles on it. That was used to ship payroll for, it was one of the lumber companies. It was a lumber company that was out in Cutton, I think, in Eureka here. That when their payroll was shipped in on the train or on the stage, it was in this super heavy metal box. So it was used here, but it was also used in San Francisco. It was taken, I think it went to Arizona at some point, all that kind of stuff. So these things do travel around, but it's, for that particular item, the thing that made it important was that it was used locally in a lumber mill, or kind of in the lumber industry. So there's that. David says, I feel like we need to do more brewery-related events. There are definitely enough breweries around here to do some kind of brewery-related event. If we ever wanted to do an exhibit on brewers, and we wanted to, highlight local brewers, that would definitely be a good idea. There are lots of local brewers, and they're so very nice. They, frequently donate things for us when we're running fundraisers so we can raise more money for the museum. A lot of them are really nice, too. I mean, a lot of the local distillers are really nice, too. Particular shout-out to Alchemy Distillery. They came out to our home brewers event that we had at the museum, and they were just so stoked to be there. They were so excited, and it was a lot of fun. I think, and I have a heck of a time with names, but the lady who operates Alchemy, I think she had a broken wrist or something, and she was just like, this is great, this is so much fun. I just really liked her energy, so that was a lot of fun. But that was a good event, it was a good time. So I really miss stuff like that, being able to talk with the community in person, being able to collaborate on events things like that. And I mean, one of the good things about this closure too, well, one of the good things about it is that there seems to be, at least in kind of this little museum bubble around here, that there's a lot of collaboration going on right now, which is really, really kind of interesting. Like we're all so busy doing all 90 different things at the same time. But when all of us are kind of forced to grind to a stop and figure out what we're going to do next, people are reaching out to each other and working with each other to figure out, okay, so we're closed. So what are we going to do now? How can we work together? Because all of us are kind of, in a grind right now. And that's been really cool. Because we had kind of started this museum collaboration effort at last year's History Symposium, which was really exciting. So it was a great way to network with people and start talking about what can we do to help each other, because there's so many of us and all of us are asking, for help from the same kind of group of people. How can we team up and really do some cool stuff? And that was a really opportune moment to establish something like that, because then this all of a sudden happened, but we had this network that we could work with. So there was that. Oh, little kitty cat. My cat roommate. I'm just gonna take a quick second to show you guys this little gem of a cat. Look at her there. She's laying in the sun. She's having a good old kitty time. Yeah, that's how she spends a good chunk of her day. And I've been able to know that because I've been working from home. So yeah, let's see. So behind the scenes also, what else? Kind of the things I listed take up a good chunk of my time. But there's always random things that come up, like, there's a leak in the ceiling, or, this light is out. Kind of things like that. So being in charge of a museum like this, and it's a small museum, that's just kind of how it is. You got to wear a lot of different hats. I know when Ben was working at the museum, he was kind of the fix-it person. He kind of knew how to fix all kinds of random stuff, along with our janitor, Jeff, our maintenance guy. He does some pretty good work. But it was always kind of like, this weird thing happened, and then we'd have to figure out how to fix it and things like that. So it kind of teaches you to be prepared for anything. Learn how to do a lot of random stuff that you wouldn't expect yourself to have to do. And kind of roll with what happens. So the whole COVID thing is a great example of having to roll with whatever happens. So it's been a wild 5 months since taking this role. So talk about crazy. Yeah, so I think in 2 days it'll have been April, May. It'll be 2 months since we closed to the public. And that's crazy. It feels like way longer. It's been kind of crazy. Definitely looking forward to reopening and things maybe not going back to normal, but going back to some semblance of I can go outside and not worry about dying. So yeah. So let's see, we got a question. So does the Clark ever do natural history events with live animals? Not now, obviously. Not that I remember. I think that's kind of the zoo's thing. We do have taxidermied birds. One of our entries for Curator Battle, of course, was our California condor. His name is Charlie. he's taxidermied. And, you know, we've had him on display. We've had other local birds, taxidermied, on display as well to kind of talk about how local birds are used in different like dance regalia and things like that for local tribes. We got a recommendation for how to do natural history events with live animals by partnering with a shelter, like an animal shelter. Heck, it'd be kind of cool just to have like pets and cats and puppies running around. Not in the museum, that would actually be awful, but like if we did a street fair or something. Oh, that'd be cool. We will have to think about that. Yeah, that'd be pretty cool. But I also really like cats and dogs and things, so. Cool. So we have about 15 minutes. Feel free to ask your questions. So David and Dana sound both like they're on board with a museum street fair. We typically do, we usually have one main street fair that we do. And that is Get Out and Play Day with the City of Eureka. It usually entails free ice cream. Unfortunately, that event has been postponed or canceled for this year for, obvious reasons. But that always tends to be pretty fun. We had the Fort Humboldt Brass Band, which is like a living history brass band kind of group, come and perform last year. We had one of the fire department's old, like, horse-drawn fire engines. That's probably not the right name for it. They came out and, had their little fire engine thing on display. We had some people from the Society for Creative Anachronism come out, and they did a sword fight in the street, which was pretty cool. And we had archery in a trailer. That was a thing. I think we had the national park come out too. And that always tends to be a pretty popular event. Free ice cream is always popular. So yeah, I'm kind of bummed we're not doing that this year, because that was always pretty fun. It, gave us a reason to all go sit outside and hang out with the public for the day. I think the Historical Society was there too. It's been a while. I can't really remember. Well, it's been almost a year, so. Alright, so Dana asks, have you ever dropped or broken an artifact? Ooh. That gives me nightmares. I have not dropped anything. Some items, when you move them unexpectedly, break, and that's always kind of awful feeling, and that has happened to me before. Feels terrible. But some things degrade in unexpected ways, particularly because I don't really have a background in how different materials decompose over time. There were some things that I picked up that I was like, oh no. So yeah, it does happen, unfortunately. Okay, so Tree asks, what are you planning to do for the first event upon opening? Oh man, I wish I knew. We currently don't have plans for an event for opening, just because we don't really know when we're going to reopen. But I think for definitely one... that's a good question. It'd be great to have, like, museum open house kind of dealio, so people can come in and visit, things like that. Depending on when we're allowed to reopen, I mean, by that point in time, we might, have a new exhibit up. The current one is still the Chinese expulsion exhibit. So, there might be a new exhibit opening. It'd be really great as kind of a performance and then an exhibit closing is to have the taiko drummers come back out. They performed at the opening of our Japanese internment camp exhibit. That is technically still up in the museum. We haven't taken it down yet because of all the traveling restrictions and stuff like that. So, and I wanted to have them perform the evening that exhibit closes. So it'd be great to have them come back again. Yeah, and depending on that timeline and how some other timelines work out, we have a couple options, but right now we don't have anything set in stone. But when we do reopen, you will most definitely know about it on social media and, you know, hopefully through like traditional media means as well, because we want everyone to know that we are reopened and people can come visit. We're of course going to be following county guidelines and things like that on sanitation, to be sure everyone's safe. Things like, you know, having staff people wear masks and everything, and asking people that come in to wear masks, things like that. Because we want everyone to be safe, and we want, you know, us to reopen and serve the public again in person. You know, because the internet stuff does definitely have its perks, but at the same time, it's, you know, you're serving different kind of groups when you're open to the public in person and when you're open to the public online. So yeah. Let's see. What else? So I'm trying to think of like the randomest thing I've had to do working at the museum. One of the funnier things that I can think of off the top of my head is we have this one case. So it's for the Grant quilt. So if you're familiar with the museum, we have this quilt that's a square, and it was made by a aid association. So this was a group of ladies who got together to collect and sometimes make medical supplies for Union soldiers during the Civil War. But they made this quilt as part of what's called a sanitary fair, where there were different things going on to raise money for sanitation for the Union troops. So one of the things that killed a lot of people in the Civil War was improper sanitation. So a lot of people were dying, not from being shot necessarily, but from infections and things like that. So there were these groups that would come together and they'd raise money and send it to the troops. Humboldt County raised, I think, the most money out of any county in California, which is pretty incredible, considering that we are smaller than most counties in California, even at that time. And so this quilt was made for that. So it was auctioned off and then redonated back and then auctioned off again until a certain amount of money was raised. And then they took that quilt and it had Ulysses S. Grant's name on it, and they sent it to him as like, thank you for all your service in the Civil War. Also, you lived in Humboldt County at a time, and we think that's really cool, so here you go. So it traveled around with the Grant family for a long time, and then it was donated back to the museum. So there's a square case that was built specially for it, because it can't be folded or anything like that. It's made out of silk, and silk degrades really badly over time. So the only way to access that case, though, is through two doors on the side, and the door openings are like maybe, which this is not a very good demonstration of size, but they're maybe like 1.5 feet, 2 feet, 2 feet tall, something like that. So you gotta open these doors and you gotta climb in if you gotta put anything in there or clean the inside of the case. So there's definitely been times where I've climbed into the case and then the door closes behind me and then I'm like, I'm in a case. That always kind of makes me laugh. So we got, my mom asks, who is the coolest person you've met at the museum? Oh man, who is the coolest person I've met at the museum? I mean, I want to say the photographer guy from the National Park exhibit, and I feel so bad that I cannot remember his name. I know his wife's name is Carolyn, and they raise bees, because he gave me some honey from the bees that he raises. Don. I think his name was Don. Oh man, what's his last he was pretty darn cool. He was a really nice guy. And he came all the way up here from Berkeley with his wife to see the exhibit, and that was really nice of him. And he gave us like really great comments on it, and he was really nice to work with. I really liked him. He was really cool. Yeah, I think his name was Don. Yeah. And then Edie asks, hey Edie, is the museum's database available to the public? Currently, no, but we are working on that as kind of a long-term project. Right now, a lot of the metadata and some of the descriptions are not very good, and a lot of the items don't have photographs, so we haven't really thought that it's been super helpful to have it available to the public yet. Also, we don't have an extra computer, so that hasn't happened yet. But with our continued digitization, we're hoping that, that'll be a thing sooner rather than later. Also, kind of part of the reason why it's not open to the public right now is we've had past registrars, when they type in the descriptions for the items, sometimes they're kind of funny. So one of them that I remember most vividly was there's a still shot picture from when they were filming Return of the Jedi in Humboldt County. And so it's a picture of Luke. It's been a while since I watched Star Wars, but it's a picture of Luke in like white clothing and a white helmet, and he's got a lightsaber. And the description said, "Man in strange white clothing holds super-powered flashlight." Which is, I read that and I was like, oh my gosh. I was sitting in the office because we all have a shared office. And I just turned around to everyone and I was like, guys, you gotta see this. Look at this. And then there's things like woman in ugly dress or like things like that. So we're trying to kind of weed that kind of stuff out. Because it definitely does not make it easier to search for things when you got descriptions like that. So anyway, that's kind of what's going on. So we got a question, are all the quilts digitized yet? We've got pictures of all the quilts on two of our storage racks. They were unrolled, photographed, documented, and then re-rolled. So we have photos of all those quilts. I think there's like 1 or 2 boxes of quilts that we need to take photos of still. But we do have a good chunk of them digitized, which is pretty cool. And that was funded by the Redwood Empire Quilters Guild. I applied for a grant in 2018. We got it in 2019 and then did the whole project that year. I was pretty happy with how it turned out too. It gave me a really good chance to take a close look at our Crazy Quilt collection, which if you're not familiar with Crazy Quilts, it's kind of all these silks and different fabrics that Victorian ladies would pick up in one way or another, and they just kind of sew them together in these crazy looking shapes, and then there'd be embroidery on it frequently. And they're kind of fragile nowadays because they were made with silk, and silk at the time was treated with these different salts that just really tears up the silk over time. So it was a really great opportunity to take pictures of all these quilts and kind of do some research on it. I created a PDF and put it on our website of information on crazy quilts, different embroidery things that show up on them, things like that. So if you're interested in learning more about crazy quilts, feel free to check that out. I think you can probably get to it from the events page, and then you go, or not events, exhibits, and then you click like past exhibits, and you can click the most recent quilt exhibit, and it should be in there. But that was a really fun project because I'm a quilter and I do embroidery as well, so it was kind of a fun personal adventure and a fun research adventure for the clerk. And that's kind of another cool thing about working at this museum is being able to kind of pursue both those like personal research inquiries and turning that into something that's usable for the general public. Particularly that Crazy Quilt book. That was a lot of fun to put together. But yeah. Alright, so we got about 5 minutes. If you have any burning questions, feel free to type them into the comments. and I can answer them here. So for, I guess, well, I can sum this up nicely. So next week, Ask the Curator. It's also going to be me, so if you have any questions between now and then, feel free to let me know. And I think what I might do is maybe I'll like look up some trivia questions. Maybe we'll like flip the tables a little bit, and I'll ask you guys some questions and see what you got to say about it. I know Dana's been working a bit on doing some kind of local trivia type thing, so we'll see what happens. But stay tuned for next week. And if you know of anyone else who has interests in local history, museums, you know, interacting with someone through the internet, feel free to let them know about this. If you go on our website, there's an Ask the Curator page that has the permanent link to our live videos. So if you click that, it should take you right to where all of our live videos are at on Facebook. They also stream through YouTube. They don't live stream, but they get posted afterwards, and they're on our website as well. So those are all some options of viewing this content, and then there's other content as well. All accessible through our website, all accessible through Facebook. And yeah, and if you have any ideas for things that you want to see, feel free to let us know. We'd love to hear it. And yeah, and I guess last thing to say, I guess, is if you enjoyed this video or have enjoyed other videos that we've done, feel free to send us some money through Facebook, PayPal, dropping a check off at the museum, things like that. We really appreciate it, and we really appreciate you guys hanging in there with us while we're close to the public. Be rest assured that we do miss you guys. We miss you guys a lot, and we're looking forward to a time when we can safely reopen and meet up with you guys and chit-chat about local history. So with that, I think I will sign off for the day. If you have any questions, feel free to let us know. With that, y'all stay safe out there. Enjoy the nice weather until it gets rainy again. And we will see you next week. Have a good one.